Good evening and welcome to Earth to the Other Side. In today's episode, I spoke with Bob Russell, who had 2 NDEs. I hope you enjoyed the show.
The first near-death experience was when I was 10 years old. It was my 6th grade graduation party at my teacher's house, and she lived on a lake. And I wasn't used to swimming in fresh water. I wasn't a strong swimmer in the first place, so I went out with all the other kids because I wanted to be one of the kids. I was a year younger than everybody else, and I always felt that I wasn't accepted. It's kind of dorky and awkward and uncoordinated. And they all swam like little fish, and there was like a man-made island out in the middle of the lake. I wanted to go there so badly, but I got halfway there and realized I wasn't going to make it. This is a really deep. They're not really lakes in Miami. They're what they call rock pits. You know, they dug up all the gravel to build Miami out of these things. And you go down 10 feet in Miami and you hit water and you have a lake. So anyway, I was about halfway back. My arms just turned to lead. I couldn't move them anymore. I just, I would try it as hard as I could, but I just surrendered to it and sank under the water. And before I lost consciousness, I was, I guess it was just the warmest, coziest. It felt like I was like snuggling up between my parents and sneaking into their bed on a cold winter night and snuggling up between them under their blankets, and just everything was warm and safe and cozy. That's the best thing I can describe dying as a child. So it was the last thought I had before passing out was, why do people worry about dying? What's wrong with them? I'd seen television shows and the cowboy shows and people threatening to kill each other all the time. What? You're threatening to make them feel cozy? That's crazy. Didn't make any sense. Anyway, that was my first near death. It didn't. Somebody on shore, one of the fathers that stayed behind as a lifeguard, he saw me and he came out and dragged me out, and I don't know what he did, but somehow like coughed up the water and came back to consciousness. Not a very remarkable near-death experience. The second one, though, when I was 19, is the one that really radically changed my life. Well, they all did. I didn't go down any tunnels. I didn't see any relatives. Didn't see any angels. Not on this one. I've encountered angels in other ones, but never met my relatives. I mean, not in a near-death experience. I've remembered past lives, and I've remembered dying in past lives and going into the afterlife and actually dying. But near death, you don't go all the way across that bridge. You kind of go halfway across, and then you're called back. But what happened was I had injured myself when I was 17. I was an elite runner at 17. And I was goofing off one day and just had a freak accident. I was stretched out over a high hurdle, and somebody 7-foot basketball center was chasing a loose ball and not looking where he was going. It was the indoor track season, so I was in the gym. And he crashed down on me just as I was fully stretched out, shoved my groin against the hurdle, broke the hurdle, and broke the synovial sac in my hip. This is 1964. We didn't have CAT scans or MRIs. You couldn't see the synovial sac. They didn't have a diagnosis for me. So I was just back at home when I was 19. I was home for spring break. My home was in Miami. That's where I grew up. And the regular doctor was on vacation, and covering for him happened to be a top semi-retired orthopedic surgeon from New York City, who'd been with Mount Sinai in New York, which is one of the best orthopedic hospitals in the world. And he examined me and he said, I got a hunch about you. I think I've seen a case like yours before. So he did a needle biopsy in the hospital the next day. And then he got back to me and said, yes, this unmistakable, those big, large bacteria. I couldn't, they're like, it's called pigmented villonodular synovitis. And it's very rare. In fact, I did some research. You're the 6th person in medical history, so we'll be filming your surgery. Like, okay, well, that's great. But They couldn't do it right away because I wanted to go back to school to finish the semester. So we scheduled it for June when the semester was over. I came back, and in those days, they did it, hip replacement was really technically like a fused hip. They sawed off the top inch and a half of the femur, bathed everything out with antibiotics because I had a bacterial infection that would if they hadn't done that, hadn't caught it, it would have just kept growing and taking over bones until it killed me. So thank God, just happened to be the right doctor at the right time, but the wrong hospital. One of the worst hospitals in Miami. And in case you don't know, Miami has not a single hospital in the top 50. It has some of the worst medical care in the country, certainly the worst for a big city. And it was even worse back in 1966 when I had this surgery. So the nurses, as it turned out, I was bleeding internally, and the nurses didn't catch it. They weren't monitoring it. And I woke up to the sound of the doctor screaming at the nurses, what are you doing to this boy? Look, you didn't monitor him. His blood pressure is almost nothing. He's going to die. What's wrong with you? Put blood in both arms, stat. And I was let him running around and nurses crying and big glass bottles of blood that they used back in those days. And then it occurred to me that, I'm up there saying, hey, calm down. It's okay. I'm fine. Look, I'm up here, and I said, oh, I'm up here. I was up on the ceiling looking down at my, this whole scene, looking at my body that was like, looked like a cadaver at that point. And I became really curious. I said, how is this possible? How am I aware? My brain's offline and I'm wide awake. I've never been more awake in my life, I think. And then I felt this light shining through whatever this entity was on the ceiling. It was just like, I knew that whatever this light was, it was enabling me to be conscious. And so I was a little scared of it because it felt so powerful, but I wanted to know what it was. So I kind of psychically turned around and looked right into it. And it was like overwhelming, just light, spiritual light permeating everything, not just me, everything in the universe, every tiny grains of sand to giant galaxies and everything. It was, and I immediately understood that this was the essence of everything. And I thought it was God. I mean, I had no idea what God was, of course, at 19. I seriously asked a question. So I'd been a, maybe since the near-death experience, I've been the first one. I've been very curious about God. And I seem to have a proclivity for understanding things that most adults didn't understand, but I never really had it very, very clear. But then once this experience happened, I said, oh my God. So I asked, what are you? And I said, I'm your soul. And I was even more perplexed. My soul, but it's going everywhere. And it's like, you, my soul. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Said, yeah, your soul is huge and it's powerful. And it chooses everything. You chose to be here. You chose this body. You chose to have this accident. You chose to have this surgery. And when it's time for you to die, you'll choose your death. I said, well, am I going to die? Am I dead now? I said, no, you're not dead now. Your body's, we can still use it. You can still use it. But if, the body, it's like a shirt to your soul, when it gets torn or worn out, you just throw it away and get another one. And I never heard of reincarnation or anything at that point. I was very naive and those kind of things. I was actually very much of a Catholic. I had gone to Catholic high school. I was going to Catholic University of America, Washington. And no, they don't talk about reincarnation. I mean, it's heresy. But there it was undeniable. And everything that was communicated to me, I understood was absolutely the truth. And my soul told me that it was at one with what we call God, which is whatever you want to call it, pure consciousness, pure awareness, the life force, pure love. I mean, there's nothing but this, and whatever this incredibly intelligent, powerful force is, it's choosing to create a multiverse out of itself. So it's, which is an act of love. And the reason for doing that is because it wants us to be able to perceive it and love it back. That's best I can express it. That's what I understood from it. So here was my soul, not separate from what we call God. Um, and it commenced to just give me like a major data dump. I don't know if you know computer terminology. I was like, it was the big mainframe supercomputer downloading onto my little laptop or something. And I was like, oh, geez, overwhelmed. Spiritual indigestion, I guess you'd call it. Um, and then in the last minute, I said, well, it started. After that, I said, wait, how am I going to remember all of this? And it's, if I'm going to wake up from this coma or whatever I'm in, don't worry, you'll remember. And I felt like this lightning bolt, something, energy, just kind of engraving the memory into my brain, into the physical brain, so that it would remember. I'm not really sure how that happens, but that's not something like that has happened in pretty much every near-death experience I've had. So I woke up the next morning or 2 mornings later, I don't remember. I tried to get my medical records, but by the time I knew there was such a thing as a near-death experience, it was not a concept. It was not a thing back in those days. I didn't even know how to talk about it to anybody, and I didn't talk to nobody about it. But the next morning, the first thing I remember when I woke up was the experience with my soul, and but all of the data that was the spiritual information that was put into in, into my soul, I guess, or into my heart, or wherever, something that's not separate. It was just like more like an opening up to the nature of truth. Um, and that really, I mean, it changed my life. I had been a psychology major, and and in the school I was going to, that meant torturing rats and monkeys and animals with Skinnerian conditioning and stuff. And I said, no, I can't do that. No, 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 no. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I took a semester and just went part time and I took creative writing, I took painting, and I took musical composition. I think, and just to try out, the creative part of myself, just to get in touch with that, and that kind of set me on fire. So when I went back to school, I started a writers club. I got myself elected editor in chief of the school literary magazine. Became an officer in the Fine Arts Council. Very interested in film, and I changed my major. I can't remember what I changed. I think initially I changed to drama. So they happened to have a good drama department at that school. And you know, I was and I wanted to change. I wanted to bring illumination to the darkness that was the Catholic University of America. Of course, that got the attention of the dean and other people, and they did not like this at all. Um, I published, instead of the usual staid literary journal that published, uh, literary analyses of um, obscure literary pieces, that were publishable in various journals of that ilk in academia. I just solicited original poetry and stories, and artwork, and all of that, and so it was like, and that caused them to kill the magazine. They took all the funding away, but it inserted a little wedge of light into the place, and it started to change. And I met the woman who would be my wife for the next 37 years. I met her there. We started living together. We were on campus and went into everything changed. And I had Decided though, I mean, I went through a couple of different majors. I think it was a math major for a while. I settled on music. I wound up with a minor in music and math and drama, but I wound up in English because that seemed the closest to what I wanted to study. Great books and all of that. So I wound up getting a fellowship and I couldn't handle the ice and the snow. You know, I was left with a leg that was an inch and a half shorter than the other. I was in a lot of pain. I walked with a cane and a profound limp, and the cold made it worse. So I got a fellowship at the University of Miami and decided to go to graduate school and move back down there. And but that longing, never left me. So I just give you just to kind. This is really kind of a continuation of it, but uh, I was in, as a grad assistant teacher, I had an office that I shared with another graduate assistant. This older woman who had gone back to get her PhD, decided what she wanted to be in life in her 40s, which is great, But my mom called me in the office one day and she said, "Son, I was watching Arthur Godfrey. You may not know who he was. He was a daytime talk show person on television and early television. And he had both his hips replaced and he was in terrible pain. And, he used to love riding horses. He had a ranch in Australia, but he can't ride his horses anymore and all of that. But he found this miracle cure. And now he's walking without a limp and he's out of pain and he's riding his horses again." So great, Mom. What is it? And she said, "Well, I wrote it down. Wait here. It's yoga." Oh, yoga. Yeah, I heard of that. Thanks, Mom. And my office mate had heard the conversation in the background. She said, "Hey, look, Bob, there's this new ashram opening up in South Miami here. And I was going to go to check it out tomorrow. You want to come with me?" And I said, "Well, hell yeah. Teach yoga, right?" "Oh, yeah." So I said, "Okay." And I went there a little early because they asked me to. And the Swami kind of checked me out to see how inflexible I was and how much pain I was in. And then he said, "Have you ever studied any ancient spiritual scriptures?" And I said, "Well, I know the Bible pretty well, but the only other thing is the I Ching." He said, "Oh, you're I Ching for spiritual enlightenment." And he started giggling to himself. And okay, I found my teacher, or he found me. I don't know, but I knew he was my teacher. I've been the guy who could help me answer all the questions that arose out of that second near death experience. So I wound up being a part as he was a direct disciple of Swami Shivananda Saraswati, an ashram brother of Swami Satchidananda and Vishnu Devananda, all of who, many others who became famous. But he was a quiet yogi. He didn't want to have mobs of people. A couple of dozen was fine for him. He published his own books. He translated ancient scriptures and commented on them and published his books. And that was what he did, and still does. He's like 92 now, and he's still doing it. I wound up doing 40 hours a week of spiritual discipline at that ashram for the next 8 years. And, it was like kind of molded the rest of my life. So it's been, to this day, I guess I consider myself a yogi. That's the main thrust. I've studied Buddhism and Taoism and shamanism, and a few others, but those are the main three. There's also a school that I've been a part of for the last 31 years now. It's called the Diamond Approach. I don't know if you've heard of it. It's centered in Berkeley. But the teacher out there, Hamid Ali, is one of my primary teachers at this point in life. And again, he's written many really great books, dozens of them, and they're all brilliant. They're all like, to me, they're sacred scripture. That's how deeply they move me and how much they've taught me. You can't learn everything from books, of course, but the books can motivate you to meditate and reflect and inquire into yourself, which is where the real learning occurs. So that goes into, I mean, like I said, through that path, I've had many what this the NDE folks call, spiritually transformative experiences. I mean, more than I could count, and I could tell you some of those, or we could go
I would
on.
love to talk about those. I just have a couple of questions, if you don't mind, before we continue.
Please go ahead. Yeah, I'm
Cool,
talking.
cool. First of all, thank you for sharing that. It's really wonderful. You had mentioned about having a sense of sort of like a clarity. I wasn't sure if you meant before the first NDE, around adults that kind of, I guess, considered you like an old soul and you had more of a sense of clarity than the ones surrounding you. Was that
And
before or after your NDE?
that was actually before. I remember the first time I became aware that there was anything going on that was different about me. I was like, I mean, I had had prophetic dreams, and I thought that was kind of weird, but my parents said, I ignore it. That's just nothing, but I had them. And I knew exactly what was going to happen, and it happened. But anyway, but around 6 years old, my mother had become an evangelical Christian, and she'd go to these tent revival meetings and things like that. And one time she dragged me along. I can't remember who it was because I didn't see the actual preacher. I was in the Sunday school tent, and the teacher was a very nice lady, and she said, I was with a bunch of other kids my age, about 6, 7 years old. I must have been 7 years old because I could read already reasonably well. And today we're going to discuss the Beatitudes. So she had written them on a blackboard. So here's the first Beatitude, and she read it. I don't remember what it is. And she said, "Does anybody have any idea what this means?" And to me, it was obvious what it meant. But all the other kids were looking at each other. Oh, and finally, I raised my hand. I couldn't stand it. I said, "Yeah." So I explained to her exactly what it meant, and she was like, yeah, that's right, Bobby. Thank you. And so, and she wanted to do the next one, and so on. And by the time she got to the third or fourth beatitude, she just, hey, Bobby, would you like to tell us what this one means? And I was kind of frustrated with, how come these people don't get this? I don't understand. I went through the beatitudes and explained it to everybody, and then at the end, I was just more perplexed than anything else. I wasn't proud of myself or anything, or didn't feel special or different. But then at the end, the teacher told my mom when she came to pick me up, Mrs. Russell, your son is a very extraordinary child. And then she took her aside to talk to her. I don't know what she told her. I just said, I don't want to hear it. I didn't want to think of myself as extraordinary. I thought of myself as extraordinarily nerdy and uncoordinated, that sort of thing. Yeah, and I guess I carry that on throughout. I knew that I was aware of things that most people weren't, and I kept it to myself. I had, like, when I was 14. I mean, my parents, I couldn't stand school after the sixth grade. The middle school just drove me crazy. I just hated it, and I would just skip school a lot. And I was on the verge of, if I missed one more day, I would have flunked the eighth grade just for attendance. So the dean called my parents in, and they had a little talk with them, and they decided we got to do something. And they wanted to send me to military school, but they couldn't afford that for the discipline, right? And the only thing I could afford was the Catholic school. So that's why I wound up going to a Catholic school. And I loved it. There were no gangs there to threaten your life like there were in the public school I was in. It was like I grew up in a poor blue collar neighborhood. I should point out that were controlled by gangs, and to this day still is in Miami. Um, just different gangs, you know. I think Jamaican gangs are controlling that part of Miami at this point. Jamaican posses. Anyway, it, that's what I was used to living with. And then the Catholic high school, all you had to worry about were the brothers. I mean, they were the badasses. They were going to take care of you if you didn't obey them. And I love the whole thing with Christian contemplation and all that. So I had skipped a grade, so I was a year younger than everybody else. But around 13, I started what they call contemplation, and I really love Saint Francis of Assisi. He was my guy. But Jesus was fine, and Mary and all that. You know, I'd contemplate them, and I would go. I just get out of my house. I mean, my mom is Italian, so my family was. I don't know if you have any idea what that's like, but you know, they're kind of noisy and boisterous, and um, always something going on.
I know exactly what that's like.
I thought you might. So I had to get out of the house. I go out under the night sky, and sometimes I kneel on sharp rocks to get past the physical body to kind of force myself out of my physical body, which I had a lot of out of body experiences. And then one day I'd climb up on the roof too. That was the quietest place. So one day I was sitting up on the roof, and stars, and it was beautiful and everything. And I was just kind of meditating and feeling, um, I don't know what, but something godlike. And suddenly my attention was drawn to the backyard. I looked down, and I saw the earth starting to move, and it was dark, right? But I could see it moving, and it was illuminated, and then gradually it moved away, and it revealed a bunch of bones. And then the bones started rattling and moving back together, and it made the face of what looked like an ancient Native American male. And then it spoke to me, and it said, "These are the bones of your fathers." And I said, "What?" And it said louder, "These are the bones of your fathers." Oh, okay, got it. Understood. Okay, and it moved back, became bones, and the earth covered it over, and it was all over. And I was like, oh. I can't tell the priest about this in confession. He won't understand. They'll think I'm crazy. They'll lock me up. I mean, I knew what happened to crazy people already at that point. So
this had come to you through meditation, though, right? In a meditative state?
I guess. I mean, I had no understanding of what it was.
I mean, it didn't feel like a dream to you or anything like that.
Oh, it definitely wasn't a dream. It was actually, this was a real thing.
Right.
Yeah. I later realized, or much later, like in my 50s, I had a series of, in my youth, before I became more formally a yogi, I had a series of shamanic experiences, and and I had the opportunity to study that more formally later in my 40s over a 4-year period. And I discovered from one of the Native American teachers that vision was a typical initiatory vision that every young boy is supposed to have when he goes through, when he enters puberty. And that in some Indian languages, the bones of my fathers is what they call the earth, the ground, the soil. That's how they think of it as a sacred thing. I had no idea what it was, what any of it meant, but it took, like I said, another 30 years for me to learn anything about it.
So what does it really mean, do you think?
Well, that the connection we have to our past, to the other humans who've gone before us, to the shamans, to this people, the spiritual people who've come before us, those are the real fathers. This was a disembodied Native American shaman who was speaking to me. His soul was still alive. I didn't understand the immortality of the soul at that point yet, until my second near-death experience. But I had any number of experiences with disembodied ancient shamans in Florida.
In between the first and the second one?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then afterwards also. More.
I have a question about the second one. That's when you saw the light of your soul, right? Piercing through.
Yeah, my soul, God, whatever.
Right.
Pure
I mean, your soul at one with God.
Yeah,
But
I
that's
think
the
of
one, the second one, right?
pure awareness at this point. The different aspects of that light, but I think of it now as pure awareness. That's what I
Pure
was.
awareness, yeah.
Not awareness of anything, it's just the awareness itself.
Right. What I wanted to ask you, because this is something I've been curious about, and it seems sort of maybe related to what you were saying. What percentage, let's just say in your case in particular, what percentage do you think of your total soul was incarnated in this lifetime?
It's
Because we're not saying that the soul or God source, what you saw and refer to itself as your soul, it's not a separated soul from you. This is the soul that's within you. Just,
within me,
you
without
only
me.
have a percentage of it, right?
The thing is, the way I perceive reality at this point is, I see time and space as totally a fiction. They're a mental creation. Ultimately, there is no time and space in absolute reality. So, yeah, all of it is incarnated in this body, and none of it's incarnated in this body all at the same time. It's like the body is a vehicle for its continued growth, spiritual evolution. The main message I got actually from my soul, I should have mentioned that. When it was talking about how easily it could just dispose of the body, said, you're here for one reason and one reason only. You have a physical form so that you can grow and evolve spiritually. Period. That's it. Anything else, well, whatever helps you do that, is good, wonderful. It doesn't matter. There's no like good or bad about it necessarily. I mean, there are some objectively not good things you shouldn't do, but I was drinking excessively at the time, for example, because I'd injured myself. I was in severe physical pain, and since they didn't have a diagnosis, they wouldn't give me pain meds. So I started drinking. 5 o'clock when class was out, I'd go to the local bar and get drunk, and then I joined a fraternity and just volunteered to be the social director. So I'd always have a case of hard liquor under my bed. So every night, my frat brothers would come in and we get plastered. And it was an effective but very, very negative and harmful tool. So I became an alcoholic for about 1.5 years, actually. And I know what they say: once an alcoholic, always an alcoholic. But really, once I had a diagnosis and they gave me some effective pain medication, no, I stopped drinking completely and never returned to it. And I will also say this: I forgot to mention, after about 3 months of doing a hatha yoga every day, the physical pain all disappeared, and I stopped taking the medication. After about 6 months, I threw away the cane. And 1 year later, I was doing advanced poses and teaching hatha yoga. So Arthur Godfrey was right. It is a miracle cure for a lot of things. I wish I could still do it. No, you can't see me now. I am an amputee. I had my left leg and half my pelvis taken out due to a very rare cancer. Huh. Which is another whole other story. I've been writing books about a lot of this, and as much as I can.
Well, thank you so much, Bob, for sharing all of this. It's been a really interesting conversation. Thanks for being my guest.
My pleasure. Thank you so much.